Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Cltv. I'm your host, Ken Lammers. This week's going to be a pretty quick one, I hope. And what we're going to do is go over answer a letter I got. Now, this letter comes from John Smith, who, of course, obviously asked to be anonymous. Mr. Lammers, I don't know if this is an appropriate question to ask, so I apologize if it's not. Heck, it's an appropriate question as long as you ain't casting aspersions on my ancestors. So, you know, I'm thinking about starting a solo practice focusing on criminal defense in Virginia in the next 12 months. The question I have is how much can a new attorney taking court-appointed cases while he builds a practice expect to get from court-appointed work, and how long until that money starts coming in from the state? I understand if this is not the type of question you care to answer. I'm sure many law students or even attorneys thinking about making the leap to solo practice have the same question. Please feel free to use this question in your blog if you feel it is appropriate. Well, I didn't use it in the blog. I used it in the video. Thanks, John. Okay. First of all, let's talk about some of the barriers to starting out. Barrier number one is going to be that you have to get qualified. They didn't used to have to do this. It used to be the judges would kind of feed you in with a couple driving suspendeds and, you know, driving without a license and stuff like that, and they slowly build you up and till they trusted you to practice in larger cases. Of course, that relied on judges to do things, and per a bureaucracy which was put in place a few years back by the General Assembly, that's not acceptable. Now you have to jump through several hoops. You have to go through a CLE that's qualified by the Indigency Board. I don't know what it's called exactly, but the people that are in charge of indigent defense now. You have to go through a CLE which they've approved. First of all, don't rely solely on their CLEs. I'm here to tell you the better CLEs are ones put out by the Virginia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and the Spring CLE for the Criminal Law Division section of the Virginia State Bar. But you have to go through their CLE, and maybe you can do that before you start practicing. But then you're also required to do a certain number of cases, trials as misdemeanors with an attorney watching over you, and a certain number before you can do misdemeanor cases, and a certain number of cases in circuit court felony trials with an attorney watching over you. First is pretty easy. I'm sure you'll be able to find somebody who'll be happy to stand there with you while you do, 4 driving suspended cases or something. Second might be harder because a lot of times, and I'm not sure if they're counting as trials, guilty pleas, or whether you have to actually, sit down and do a jury trial. You have to sit down and do a jury trial like they do for, those trying to be qualified for capital defense. If that's the case, it may take you a long time to get qualified in circuit court for felony cases. I don't think it is, though. Anyway, you're going to have to get these qualifications. The local bar, somebody from the local bar will probably be happy to stand next to you or be in court with you when you do your first few misdemeanor cases to get you rolling. And let's face it, that's where you're going to be starting out at, probably. You may, and there are some minor felony cases that you might be able to handle well, felony habitual offender or simple possession cases, but the odds are you're going to start out in general district court, which is where most of us start out at. So those are the hoops you have to jump through to begin with. Now, let's assume you jump through those hoops. And the next thing you're going to have to do is get a judge to put you on the court-appointed list. Now, different places handle this different ways. Some places have a list of, X number of attorneys who you're either on the list or you're not on the list, and they give cases to who's on the list. Some places have rotating attorney lists where they say, okay, for this month we're going to have these 10 attorneys, and for next month we're going to have those 10 attorneys, and for the next month we're going to have those 10 attorneys. That really doesn't work very well, but you'd be surprised how many big jurisdictions do it because of political reasons. So what you'll end up with is you'll have to get on the court-appointed list at least one jurisdiction, probably more than one, unless you're going to locate in the middle of a giant jurisdiction. I'd still recommend going and get in a court-appointed list in 2 or 3 jurisdictions just to let you see what's going on out there. Be a little bit careful. If a place is too eager to get you and you're just starting practice, that may tell you something about what's going on in that courtroom. One of the first courthouses I got indigent work in, I eventually abandoned because of, well, it was a bad place to practice where they made unreasonable demands. Anyway, so let's assume you get on, the judge puts you on the court-appointed list and starts giving you cases. They may assign them by day. Everybody who's going to be Monday the 15th is going to be Ken Lamers. Everybody who's going to be Tuesday the 16th is going to be Jason Jones. Everybody that's going to be Wednesday the 17th is going to be, John Smith. Now, depending on how big the county is you're practicing in, there may be only 1 or 2 days of court, or maybe just one in a particular county. So, but if you're in a big jurisdiction, of course, there's going to be court every day. All these things will vary from place to place. Don't count on getting a whole bunch of cases at the beginning. What you're going to end up with at the beginning, more than likely, is a judge who's going to try you out on 1 or 2 cases. And if he tries you out on 1 or 2 cases, it's not going to be a whole lot of money flow coming in. Now, I'm not sure, and I'm dated on this, but when I stopped doing criminal defense and became a prosecutor, I think it was capping out at $120 per misdemeanor offense. And you got $120 no matter what for the first misdemeanor offense. After that, you have to justify. And after I left criminal defense and became a prosecutor, apparently they made it so that you can apply, if you keep track of your hours, for funds above the $120 if you can justify it and if the judge thinks it's justified. Now, you'll find a lot of criminal lawyers in Virginia probably aren't doing that because they're not used to it. But I'd suggest you start keeping some hours, and if you go above, start applying for the time, applying for the pay. Especially I'm suggesting it in misdemeanor cases. I think you'll find in most misdemeanor cases you won't go above what you'd get paid. But when you get to felony cases, you're going to find a lot of times you'll be above what you were supposed to get paid. And I'm not sure what the pay level is in felony cases right now. I think it was $420 the last time I heard, but it may be higher per felony. Again, there are some provisions for going above that if you've worked above that level. Now, if you get, when you start out, you're going to have to deal with the fact you're not going to have much money at the beginning coming in. Now, you can work that one of several ways. I had a job when I started doing criminal defense work. Kept me going for a while. Other people have savings accounts, or wives, or husbands who are working. So you can get things, keep things flowing. If you've got, and part of my plan, I guess you want to call it that, was that I was living pretty doggone poor. Now, if you've got familial obligations or such, you may not be able to do that. So, think carefully about what you're doing here. Now, how long will it take them to start paying you? Well, okay, you've got to get through your case first. So if you're appointed, on the 1st of August, and the case is set on the 9th of September, and, it gets continued once until the 23rd of September, or more likely, every place seems to continue to place things for a month most of the time. So it gets continued to the 9th of October. Okay, so 9th of October, you complete your case. Now that's pretty much, it's 2 months. At that point, you'll turn in your paperwork to get paid. They don't hand you a check right away. They're going to send it up to the Supreme Court of Virginia, get your pay check type. Now, when your first ones, you're going to have to send up, all the income tax forms and all that stuff too, which is going to slow it down. So count on at least 6 weeks from that point. So basically from where you start, and this may be a worst case scenario, it may not be, quite honest with you, count on at least 3 to 4 months before you're really going to start seeing paychecks. Okay, now, and don't count on the first, at first having this huge torrent of checks. They're going to start trickle as a trickle, and then when the judges start to trust you, and you start to make yourself known among the bar, and people put you forward, then you're probably going to start getting more cases, enough to live on, hopefully in the end. Although that can be a tricky proposition. So, count on like a 4-month window maybe. And let me tell you this. When you get paid depends a lot on how quickly your clerk's office processes that paperwork. I have been blessed in that I have worked in places where the clerk's offices have worked fairly quickly on these matters. Usually from the moment I turned in the check, I can count on 3 weeks, a month to the outside to get the check after I turn in the paperwork. I have heard horror stories from other jurisdictions where people have turned in their paperwork and turned in the next paperwork and turned in the next paperwork, and 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, suddenly they get a monster load of checks when the clerk's office sat down and did them all and cleared them all at once, sent them all to the Supreme Court of Virginia, and you get $10,000 worth of checks at one time, which is wonderful when you've got it in your pocket. But when your creditors are going, okay, we want our money for your gas, we want our money for your electricity, we want our money for this, that, and the other thing, it's not really all that fun to make it through those few months. So you might want to feel out local defense attorneys about that beforehand. Let me say something to you here. Don't be afraid, or, look into PD office. If your locality that you plan on going to has public defender's offices, don't be worried about looking into them. That's not a bad place to go. You can get some really good experience there. Same thing for prosecutors' offices. Now, of course, there's going to be a mindset in each, and you'll get a mindset anywhere you practice of, us against them. We are a confrontational profession, and whichever one you start practicing at, you're going to hear about all the evils the other one does. And if you switch over, you're going to hear about the evils that the ones where you were before have been doing. But I'm of the mind personally that if you can't work on both sides, you're not really looking for justice. Now I know there are people who disagree with me on that, but I worry that people who work only on one side become kind of myopic and don't get the whole picture. Well, I think I've said most all I've got to say. Oh, I do have one other thing I want to say. A lot of people think they're going to start doing court-appointed work and they're going to use it to build their practice, and that they will branch out from where they started doing court-appointed work, or that they will, from doing this court-appointed work, develop a clientele that actually pays in criminal law. I want to warn you against this. It's not easily done. Most people who do court-appointed work do mostly court-appointed work. Okay, they may get a few people who walk in the door and pay money, but most of their work is court-appointed. And once you get into an area of practice, it is hard to move out from that area. Now, there are some things which are somewhat complementary with criminal law practice. Divorce work, things having to do in juvenile court, civil side, juvenile and domestic court, civil side. Some people, personal injury, some bankruptcy. But most people I saw in those areas, really, criminal law wasn't their first call. If you start out doing court-appointed work, don't be surprised if that's where you end up. Yeah, it can be rewarding. You're going to have to churn pretty hard to make things pay. And, well, with that little bit of a warning, I wish you luck. I hope I haven't said too much to dissuade you, because we do need qualified, competent people doing both criminal defense and prosecution. And, well, I wish you the best of luck. And to everybody else out there, hopefully, inshallah, God willing, I will be able to get my regular camera working again and get you a decent Cltv next week. But I'm not promising anything. So I'll see y'all next week, and have fun.